And thank you for joining us. My name is Michael Schachter. I'm a Director of Product Marketing at Allot. And in today's TST, or Telco Smart Trends webinar, we will present the results of our recent worldwide survey of mobile network operators, CSPs, communication service providers, if you will, in which we try to gauge the status of the 5G journey, where everyone is in terms of deployment, what their expectations are moving forward. We'll touch on some of the features, look at monetization issues, and also concerns that your colleagues and yourselves may have with 5G as it's being rolled out. And throughout, I will also touch briefly on Allot products and solutions and how they dovetail with some of these developments, perhaps with some of the concerns and the challenges that we've uncovered in the survey. But the focus is on really sharing the findings with you so that you can see what your colleagues around the world think about these topics. I think you'll find it interesting. Some of it was surprising for us and maybe will be for you as well. We will be generating a nice report booklet out of this material, and we'll be sending that to all the participants. We'll also be sending a recent IDC report on 5G that touches on some of these same topics. And we'll send you all of this after today's presentation. I'm not doing this alone. I'll be presenting this with, with Stephen Saw. Let me move over to the next slide. So Stephen is he's a director at Coleman Parkes Research, and they conducted this on our behalf anonymously. The participants don't know that Allot was asking the questions, and so it's real, clean data, straight from the horse's mouth, if you will. And Stephen will present the survey methodology, and throughout add some comments, some insights and nuances to help us get the material across to you. What we'll be covering after this introduction is an overview of the survey, the key findings, and then a summary. It's all being recorded. We'll share a link to the recording after it's complete, so you can find it from the link that we send you. You can find it on Allot.com with all of our other webinars and other information. And you're more than welcome to revisit it and to share the link with your colleagues who might have wanted to attend but were unable. But we'd like to make this interactive, that is to say a Q&A session at the end. So please use the Q&A window as questions occur to you, and hopefully we'll get to them at the end of the presentation. And if not, we'll get back to you offline by follow-up email. And during the survey or the survey report, and as fitting, I guess, befits a survey presentation, we will also be asking you some poll questions, partly to understand who you are, but also to get additional data points, and it'll be interesting to see how that might compare with some of the findings of the survey. So let's jump into it. And before we actually start, let me just ask those first couple of questions that I wanted to gauge kind of who you are. So let me launch the first question for you. And the question really is, who are you? Do you work for a fixed mobile or converged operator, or perhaps an enterprise that sells to the CSPs or some other organization altogether? And of course, you're all welcome to be here on this poll, on this presentation, which is geared towards obviously the CSP market, but may be of interest to other companies as well. So we'll give it just another minute. The more of you that participate in the poll, the more interesting, obviously, the results are. And I will end it now, and I will share the results with you. So as you can see, most of you are from the CSP business or from companies that sell to the CSP, and predominantly mobile, but also converge. And this is good because it's all about 5G. So here we go. We will now jump into the presentation, and we'll start with Stephen, who will introduce Coleman Parkes and talk about the survey methodology. Over to you, Steve.
Thank you. Good to meet everyone virtually on the call. My name is Stephen Saw. I'm one of the directors at Coleman Parkes, and we've been partnering with Allot for the last few years, running their surveys, trying to understand behaviors in CSPs, but also their customers. So this particular survey, if you could go to the next screen, please, is focused on the CSPs. We conducted the research very recently. So this is very new data between March and April 2022. We used the phone to web methodology, which gives us the accuracy in targeting. So it was all responding to recruited by the telephone, asked a series of questions in a quantitative style, so they could answer from a list of options and use rating scales and so forth. And those respondents were senior individuals involved in 5G developments. And you can see that we've got global representation as well. So the results we're going to look at are truly global, but we also have some good regional splits. If you go to the next slide, please. And this just gives you a bit more information around the audience profile itself. You can see in the center there that these are very senior individuals, and there's a nice mix of tiers as well, tier 1 and tier 2's CSPs. So very hot off the press research. And if you go to the next slide, please, Michael. And just to kind of summarize the overall findings that Michael is going to take us through shortly. And bearing in mind the date that we did the survey, so this is very recent, what was quite encouraging for us to see is this strong sense of optimism amongst the CSP community about 5G in general. And that there's an expectation that subscriber rates are going to increase quite rapidly. And with that, there's an opportunity to start to create revenue streams through consumer entertainment offerings before moving to private mobile networks for businesses. We also looked at the cloud, and it was very interesting to see that quite a few, or majority of the CSPs are planning to utilize public cloud for 5G deployment, and across different function areas as well. And those function areas do vary by region. I think it's clear that within each region, CSPs are moving in different speeds in different ways, interested in different function areas. So we'll touch on that as we go through. There are still some concerns when it comes to 5G. I think a lot of CSPs are expecting similar challenges to overcome as when 4G was rolled out, and the impact it might have on end user quality experience. There's still some concerns around 5G network security, but as we can see, this sense of optimism, which really does pull through in the results, suggests that CSPs are aware of these issues and are now trying to overcome them. But there is this sense that it's going to be more severe due to distributed architecture, IoT, and capacity. So over to Michael to take us through the results.
Yeah, okay, thank you very much, Steve. So, I think the key takeaway here is we did ask the questions, but they didn't know it was us asking, and it was all done, anonymously. So we divide the survey questions and answers, kind of into three main areas. As Stephen said, the deployment optimism, monetization plans, because you want to make some money off of all of this, and the concerns moving forward, and then we'll summarize the findings at the end. So let's just jump right in there. Before we go to the results, a couple of things I just want to touch sort of level the playing field here. 5G, you all know what it is. Some of the key technologies that are going to help it move forward are network slicing, this idea of kind of a virtual end-to-end subnetwork, which can appear as a network in of itself and makes possible all kinds of things like guaranteeing end-to-end quality for types of services or for specific customer segments. And that's one of the new exciting things. Another important and exciting concept is the concept of edge computing, which means that there's going to be these multiple breakout points as opposed to today's networks where pretty much you go through it this whole pipe to the very end until you get out to the internet. And this is important because, you know, the three big business drivers that are expected are the you know, enhanced mobile broadband, right? You know, we're all going to enjoy these huge pipes. There's going to be massive IoT communications, you know, dense you know, smart cities, smart grids, smart everything, with, you know, hundreds of thousands, millions of IoT devices, and so they need, and then for the low latency, the ultra reliable low latency, we need the edge computing and the breakout points, so as to be able to shorten the data path and enable all of these new services. And then, kind of a spoiler alert, we at Allot have been talking for a while about kind of the flip side of this new architecture, which is, as a colleague of mine likes to say, multiple local breakout equals global break-in potential. And so this distributed architecture and all of these devices that typically are not very secure, and these big pipes together present a security challenge. And we'll get back to that a little bit later. But let's start with the exciting news, the kind of the optimism. And we will see in the following slides that there's a lot of kind of upbeat feelings here. So let me go to another poll question, and I will ask what, you know, where you are in your deployment if you're a CSP. And if you're not a CSP, think about your service provider and where you understand them to be. So everybody can answer this. You know, have you already started, and have you started with non-standalone, meaning you're riding on top of a 4G, or have you already started with standalone, meaning it's a pure end-to-end 5G network, or you're going to be starting a non-standalone in the coming year and a half, or maybe you're going to be starting with standalone in the coming year and a half. So let's see how we get the results here. And the standalone, non-standalone, I'm going to talk about that again, and maybe I should have on the first slide. Non-standalone is kind of the typical gradual deployment on top of an existing 4G core. So the RAN, the radio access part, is 5G, but initially it'll be on top of a 4G core, which will slowly be evolved into standalone. Okay, so let's see what you all had to say about this. Let me share the results. So first of all, similar to what we've seen, 5G is happening, right? Most of you have already started, and with non-standalone predominantly. And those of you who haven't started, in the next 18 months, fairly even split, but more of you in standalone mode, which makes sense because you'll have been able to see kind of what the industry is doing, moving, you know, currently, and you'll be able to build off of that. So thank you for that, and let us dive into our actual results. So like yourselves, and this is interesting because at the end of last year, the GSE published a report showing that, you know, of the 400 launches or initial investments in deployment, only 68 were non-standalone, and only 7 were actually launched. And yet we see a very strong movement forward in this year, in this calendar year, 2022. And if we add next year to it, so we're already seeing, you know, more than half of you out there already with standalone. And starting with non-standalone over, you know, the next few years, it kind of reflects what we just saw amongst yourselves as well. So 65% are planning to move to standalone over the next 4 years, with 35% already starting in this year. So I think that's you know, as Stephen said, it's happening. And even if last year was a little bit slower than anticipated, there's a sense that it is really moving forward. So, you know, we had the kind of the down pitch of GSA at the end of the year, but your response and the survey respondents are that, in fact, momentum is building. So that's exciting. I think it's exciting for us in the industry, and it's exciting for us as consumers because, you know, we want to enjoy 5G, right?
And I think it's quite interesting as well, just to bear in mind the regions as well, that you can see that different regions are moving at different paces, either starting with non-standalone or standalone. So But yeah, I think it's something that CSPs are striving towards starting this year in terms of standalone. But yeah, as Michael said, that within the next 4 years, there's around 65% planning to move. So really good, encouraging signs.
Yeah, and it'll come into play when we talk about monetization as well. We wanted to check it sort of in another direction. So we asked a slightly different question, which is how quickly will your population be covered by your 5G deployment? Because we know that in a lot of places 5G is being deployed gradually. Since there is 4G coverage, CSPs can allow themselves to sort of not take their time, but do it in a geographical sense gradually. And again, here we see that it's happening rapidly. North America and parts of APAC are certainly more aggressive with this new technology, but everybody is looking to build it out across their networks. And we also see that in terms of, we asked it also about full coverage, and so that you're all planning to really cover your whole networks. So initially maybe focusing on the densely populated areas, which makes sense because that's where LTE is probably getting congested and you need the additional capacity. But over the next few years, certainly, you're all going to be there. So that's encouraging to see as well. We looked at it from yet one more kind of perspective, and that has to do with adoption rates, because it's one thing to deploy it, it's another thing to find that your users are signing up for it. And so the next question we'd like to ask you is what you expect to see as your subscriber adoption rate, let's say by the end of next calendar year, right? So in the next, by another year and a half, will a quarter have adopted it? Will less than half, more than half, and so on. So it's a new technology. It's expensive handsets. It's waiting to see what it really brings us beyond what we can do today. So I think those are some of the factors that will, impact adoption rate. So let's see what you all think. And let me share the results. Yeah, so I think, the majority of you think it'll be still a little bit under 50%, but nearly a third think it will be between 51 and 75%. So, fair enough, right? And let's see what the 100 CSPs around the world had to say about this. I think it's not dissimilar. Only 12% think it'll be below 25%. 47% think it'll be between that and 50. And so it's a very similar kind of response. And this is, I think, a relatively quick adoption rate. And in fact, I think the anticipation throughout the industry is that 5G, once it's available, will take off. And this, I've been sort of guilty of advising my friends to, when buying new phones, not to worry so much about 5G because it's going to take a little bit of time. But fair enough, because a phone, you own it for about 3 years on average, and so it looks like people are reasonably optimistic about 5G spread and 5G pickup. So that's good to see.
I think it's clear in the in the UK now, when you sign up, you're offered 4G, 5G. And there's been a lot of noise and advertising and so forth around the benefits of 5G. And I think there were some concerns around it, but I think a lot of people have overcome those concerns now. So it's really encouraging to see that these high rates as of April this year.
Yeah, so it looks like it's coming. And we were interested in another aspect of this, kind of accelerating deployment, accelerating adoption, and so on. And that had to do with the public cloud, because there's been a lot of talk about how 5G and the cloud are made for each other, and each will help drive the other by virtue of, cloud helping to enable this distributed architecture, rapid, upgrade, rapid deployment, scalability, the ability to deal with, surges because of the virtualized and orchestrated rollout, scaling out, scaling in, and so on. On the other hand, the public cloud is the public cloud. And so will service providers be willing to kind of relinquish their own control over their own hardware, right? It's very different than, bare metal in your own data center. And yet already 61% today are talking about, yes, deploying 5G in the public cloud. And this is exciting news, I think, because of the technological innovation in general. Exciting for us because we have invested ourselves heavily in readying ourselves for the cloud. All of our network intelligence functionality is available now as cloud native microservices. And it does clearly seem that service providers are ready for the cloud and are expecting it. And when we asked what functionality they expect to deploy in the cloud, it was pretty uniform and pretty much across the board, which could mean everything and could also mean nobody really knows yet. But there's an expectation that this cloud model will be used and will be deployed, and the technology progress seems to be sweeping everybody in the excitement. So that's to do with the cloud. Another aspect, a new way of looking at things, and I touched on this early, has to do with slices. And slices, any which way you slice it, the greatest thing since sliced bread. Maybe one day we'll be talking about the greatest thing since sliced networks. And I wanted to ask, we wanted to learn about attitudes toward these network slices, because that is, as I mentioned in the initial 5G slide, it is one of the great promises and new aspects of 5G, the ability to create these virtual networks within a given deployment, and to be able to guarantee end-to-end levels of quality, at least in theory, for different types of services, either at the high level of the big three, right? The enhanced mobile broadband, the IoT, and the ultra reliable low latency. And so those are three different kinds of services, perhaps with different performance profiles and different quality needs, but all the way down to specific, services for specific users. Could you be offering, specific slices for different streaming applications and services, or different games, and this, of course, could then tie into your marketing it to different population groupings and so on. Anyway, 86% of you are planning to deploy slices once the networks can do it, and somewhat surprisingly, 12% have claimed to have already started working with slices. I would take this, with a bit of a grain of salt, and maybe that's only the few who have really deployed standalone already, which we saw was not that high last year, although we're almost halfway into this year. And maybe it also talking about starting in trials in limited areas and so on. But clearly there's excitement here as well. And it's important to keep in mind that these true slices really do require the end-to-end standalone, right? You can't really talk about a slice if the RAN is 5G, but the core is 4G, where the slicing technology doesn't exist and isn't planned to exist. So it really does require end-to-end. And then when we wanted to understand what you had in mind, or what the service providers around the world had in mind, so about a third, or exactly a third, we're talking about the big three: enhanced mobile broadband, machine type communication, and ultra reliable low latency. So it's, it's at a high level, but it's different types of services with different performance requirements. And that's already interesting. Nearly the same amount, we're talking about it only for, large enterprise customers. where there's a lot of talk about that being, where monetization is going to happen. And so you need to be able to guarantee quality of experience there. 16% said it's going to be on dozens or hundreds, and 20% said they don't know yet. And so I'm kind of grouping those together. We don't really know yet. We need to see it out there. We need to see it performing and delivering, but it's an exciting thing to look forward to. Yeah, Steve, go ahead.
I was just going to, echo that point. I think it's really encouraging to see that CSPs are at least thinking about slicing architecture now. And again, it kind of just reaffirms how seriously 5G is being taken amongst the CSP community.
Yeah, absolutely. And we took another, tack at that when we asked about mobile private networks. Because one of the exciting things, as I mentioned, that you can do with a slice is this virtual end-to-end network for an enterprise customer, for example. And so 90% are talking about deploying that in the coming 2 years. And again, this reflects this, strong belief that one of the big monetization plays in 5G is the ability to, sell this virtual network concept to, large business customers. Now, I have to say here that there may be a little bit of confusion in the way I phrased this question in the survey, because mobile private network could also be taken to mean actually deploying a private physical network, for an industrial setting or a health campus or some other large organization that actually wants its own network. I think people understood me to be talking about the virtual side of this, but either way, I think there is a strong message here that this is one of the, business monetization, if you will, directions that CSPs are anticipating, and that does sort of segue for us to the next topic, which is monetization. Because one of the big challenges and sort of global concerns is, okay, great new technology, huge possibilities, unforeseen, services and applications. How are we going to make money, right? I mean, how are you, the service provider community, going to turn the cost of deploying, this new infrastructure and the licenses and the spectrum and so on into and so we for you about that, and that is initially, where do you think the money is going to come from in 5G? Will it come from fixed wireless access, putting a 5G modem into somebody's house and giving them broadband without needing to get fiber to the house? Or will it come from gamers? Will it come from mobile private networks? Will it come from video streamers who want high quality video? And again, I'm talking about initially. So this is like, in the early days of 5G, where do you expect to see your revenue? So if we could get a few more answers, that would be great. And this is, this is a lot of speculation. So there's no right answer, no wrong answer. And perhaps unfairly, I think I changed the order of the answers, which you never know statistically what impact that has on your results. But let's end the poll and let's share the results. So a high number are expecting fixed wireless access to be the early revenue monetization stream. Next comes mobile private networks, followed by gamers and video, which together are about a third as well. Interesting indeed. And let's take a look at what we saw in the survey. So here was a little bit different. And to me, the big surprise was that fixed wireless was so low. And you all also seem to think it was high, although I did ask it first in your survey. this was talked about as the low-hanging fruit, right? Because it's just about access. It's not about content. It's not about services. It's about providing broadband to people who maybe are having trouble getting it. And companies like Verizon were talking about that as being the initial play. It doesn't require a wide selection of fancy smart devices. It just needs a modem with a SIM in the home. And so, but in the worldwide survey, 33% talked about gamers and 23% talked about video streamers. And we thought it made sense to group those together. And I think, we've been seeing a lot of talk around, the last few years that we are not in the telco industry anymore. We're in the entertainment industry, right? And there's big questions of who owns the entertainment content. You certainly own the entertainment access. And so that's why the monetization becomes such a challenge, because other people are owning the content. But this definitely shows that the entertainment world is expected to be a strong factor of monetization, and a quarter mobile private networks. So that goes back to the rolling out private networks to business customers as being part of the expected shift in 5G from previous monetization models. So I thought this was a very interesting interesting finding.
I think it does again vary by region as well. So monetization expectations does vary by each of the regions.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense because of cultural differences yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and what I thought was very interesting here was to tie this back to the previous survey that we did with Coleman Parkes, and that was, I think, during 2020-21. We asked about the ability to detect, right? Traffic detection, will it still be important in 5G? Because there was a sense in the industry hype and that 5G is going to be so big, so bountiful that you won't really need to know what's running in your network because everything will run smoothly. And yet the service providers, yourselves, all said that we need to know what's going on in our network because we know that gamers and are the likeliest to churn over quality. So that was interesting. And that sort of kind of parallels the where can we find monetization. And a further question we asked there, which really dovetails nicely, is that service providers believed a year ago or half a year ago, looking forward to 5G, that it was the gamers and the streamers who were likeliest to pay a premium for guaranteed quality. So, that's two sides of the same coin, right? They are the ones most sensitive and likely to leave. But on the other hand, they're also the likeliest to stay and pay more for the privilege to stay to get this high quality from you. And so this is nice to see that there's consistency moving forward. And so that explains why many CSPs expect those people to be the early source of monetization. And then again, let's go back to the enterprise monetization. We asked about mobile private networks for business customers, but which business customers? Who do you think you're going to sell this to? And so we divided it into small, medium businesses, into large kind of local enterprises, and into multinational corporations. And I got to say, I was surprised here because I didn't expect so many of you to expect that you'll be able to sell this service to the small and mediums. I didn't think that they would be likely to spend money on that and would hope to do well enough with general 5G, but a third of you thought otherwise. And it was quite an even, break between the three groups, although one could look at it as 2/3 are going to be selling this to big business and 1/3 to small, medium business. But again, it's expected to be, I think, a key part of 5G monetization. Yeah. And again, I think if we dig down into the regional boxes, you'll see that it's not consistent across the regions. EMEA is much more keen, for example, on small, medium businesses. So that was an interesting regional difference as well. All right, so let's move a little bit forward. Monetization, as we said, is a sort of a challenge and a concern. Let me figure out how I can advance my slides once again. Okay, so one of the things that we've been hearing a lot of concern about among our early 5G customers and prospects is this whole, world of unlimited data. And the concern is around tethering, right? Tethering, the idea that a mobile device can become a hotspot that the rest of your family or your friends or your colleagues, your dormitory mates, whomever, can actually be doing their heavy data traffic through your connection because you've got unlimited data and you've got a big enough pipe coming through the air to your device. And this would, of course, cut into the number of accounts that you might sell into a family or an apartment or whatever the grouping of people is. And there seems to be a lot of concern about that. And as many as 72%, I mean, almost only 1% said they weren't going to offer it. And if you group all of these numbers together, there's a perceived need to limit it, to block it, or even to charge extra money for it. And then, of course, this begs the question of, well, but then you need to know when and where tethering is happening. And so, we're here to help with that because that's not something that's necessarily readily available just from within your deployed infrastructure. And we have solutions already deployed that detect tethering, and we're working constantly to improve and upgrade them through all kinds of machine learning techniques that are able to distinguish all of the traffic coming from a particular device, whether there's another device behind that device that's actually the source of that traffic. So this is an interesting concern because monetization of 5G is so important, and you don't want to be losing revenue.
I think also it's telling of the times because and it's good to be concerned about these particular areas. If you think about mobile working, consumers are now more likely to be working from home or working outside of the office, and so tethering, we're talking huge amounts of volume of data being trafficked through, so it's right to be concerned about these areas. So solutions that are out there should definitely be looked for.
Yeah. You definitely want to be getting full compensation for
Exactly.
the amount of traffic that you're handling and enabling. So yeah, it's a concern. It's a concern in 4G. We've seen it in 4G as well, but it's a bigger concern in 5G because of the bigger volumes. And so on the topic of concerns, one of the big questions and one of the big hopes is will 5G solve congestion? And I think in the industry, there was a lot about talk how 5G will solve congestion because huge order of magnitude increase in capacity and bandwidth and so on. So we wanted to see what CSPs were anticipating, and we have a vested interest here because we've been sort of pitching the line that says, if you build it, they will come. And this seems to be a belief out there, right? 86% are not convinced that 5G will solve LTE congestion. We'll get to 5G in a second, but it's a 43% of you think you'll need, to continue investing, maybe only in densely, maybe only where 5G wasn't deployed. But some of you, 43%, a similar number, think even where LTE will be deployed. So it's not like we're shutting down our investments in 4G just because we have 5G. Not everyone's going to move. We saw that that's going to be quick and yet gradual, if that can be said at the same time. But 4G is going to continue to have congestion issues and quality issues, even as 5G is being rolled out. But what about 5G itself? Will there be congestion in 5G networks? So, many, 15% said no, 21% general yes, 46% only in dense areas, and 18% only where there's limited bandwidth issues. But there is a feeling that there will still be congestion in 5G, right? And that was, I thought, quite interesting. So I think people are being very, open-eyed and clear about, technology doesn't solve everything, right? The other way of talking about congestion, of course, is quality of experience. And so not surprisingly, if people are still worried about congestion, they are still worried about the quality of experience that they know they need to be giving the end user, right? We're charging them for 5G. We spent a lot of money on 5G. Everyone expects great quality. And so we asked that question, right? What do you think? So 14% are not concerned. 5G will be big enough and broad enough to handle it. Half of you, though, are as concerned about 5G as 4G. It'll be the same issue, right? You build it, but it's going to fill up. And interestingly, and this was very interesting, 35%, which is a big number, are actually more concerned than they were with 4G. And that harkens back to my early slide about, threats and attacks and so on. But if we take it even from a positive note, we've all seen it in our cars, right? New highways are built and new, clover leafs and lanes are added, and within a very short period of time, they fill up with traffic. And we've seen it with technology. We saw it from 2G to 3G and 3G to 4G. To paraphrase, if you build it, they will come. VR, AR, services that we can't even imagine. I think there's an expectation that, 5G is going to be out there and then it's going to fill up because, that's what happens and that's what always happens. And to clarify, we asked about, your bandwidth. And it's not that you're concerned that you don't have the 100 megahertz to handle 5G. You're not concerned about that. You're concerned about what you've got is going to fill up. It's going to catch up. And so that's, I think, a very interesting take on it. Again, as I said, very clear-eyed and sober. The standards committees can talk about, all of this technological advance. And this is good because we saw this again in last year's QOE survey, right? You're all deploying it, but you do need to be able to detect traffic so as to be able to understand at the application level, at the subscriber level, where is your congestion, where do you need to improve quality, and how can you do that? And here, let me just throw in a small advertisement. We have a solution that we call Smart 5G, and it's exactly about handling that because your network is going to fill up and maybe it'll be only at peak hours initially, and maybe it'll be more of a problem going forward. But if you could have deep application awareness and even sub-application awareness, right, distinguishing between chat and VoIP, right, and so on, then you can begin to do things to manage it and to keep yourself from going above the available bandwidth. And you can do it by giving streaming, and video a lot of bandwidth, but download, and peer-to-peer can be shrunk. And you can only do this if you've got the deep granularity and the fine touch control. So you need additional solutions like what we bring to the market in order to handle these times of congestion and to maintain customer quality. Another concern area, and I gave the spoiler at the beginning, has to do with security. 5G is talked about as, built-in security solution. From day one, the network is going to be secure, more secure. It's not an afterthought that was kind of added to 4G, added to 3G. It was designed in from the bottom up, and yet you're worried. Your colleagues are worried, right? 92% of you are concerned about it. Let me, so I'll skip the poll for this one, but it'll be the same as 4G. Or it'll be worse because of the distributed architecture, the IoT, and the expanded capacity. And this is, this is a message that a lot has been sort of beating the drum on for 3 years already. 5G is great, it's exciting, it's distributed, it slices and so on, but it's got a built-in vulnerability issue, and we need to address it. And your colleagues are worried both about incoming and outgoing attacks, right? By incoming, it's those big volume DDoS attacks that can flood your network. And in the age of ultra reliable low latency, even just slowing down things a little bit will crash some of these services. And if those services are smart cars, then crash becomes a loaded term. But outbound also is a problem because you are now going to be servicing hundreds of thousands or millions of IoT devices, most of which are not intelligent enough to be secure. They've got this single purpose. They're reading your gas meter or your electric meter or the traffic lights and so on. And yet they can be easily taken over. And then attacks can go out through your network, making you look like the source of the attack. And so those are also of big concern. And so if I go back to that diagram that we talked about earlier, where there are now multiple break-in points because of all the breakout points, we have a solution called 5G Net Protect, which has already been deployed in tier 1 cloud and hybrid customers, which can scale out and can block attacks wherever they happen, and in a cloud native environment or all the way back down to bare metal, depending on how you're deployed. But you need to be in line in order to instantly detect and mitigate, especially because of those ultra reliable low latency services that you want to be bringing to the market. You really can't afford, rerouting to scrubbing centers and so on. And by the way, we have a webinar coming up in a couple of weeks on DDoS in the time of 5G. So we will hope to see you there as well. That brings me to kind of the key takeaways, time to summarize, and then we'll leave us a little bit of time for questions. So what have we got? So the first thing, and starting with the upbeat, the positive side of things, there's a lot of optimism. It remains very high, or it's even higher. At the beginning of the year, there was a little bit of talk in the industry about, we've been hyping 5G and it's not really taking off. Or if it is taking off, it's not standalone. But both you and the 100 of CSPs surveyed have more optimism, 4 or 5 months into the year. The forecast is cloudy in a good sense. This also means that third-party vendors such as ourselves need to be ready for your cloud deployments. And I suspect that the 61% number will actually accelerate, because once it becomes real and it's happening and it's working, and it brings all of the cloud benefits, I think there will be an accelerated move toward the cloud. Monetization, it's a challenge. It appeared on our survey that entertainment and enterprise are the initial focus. In your own poll, you talked about fixed wireless access as being significant. And of course, ultimately, the enterprise, the business customers are seen as a big source of monetization, also because of their big budgets. But going now to the concerns, as I mentioned, there are concerns about congestion and QoE. There's an understanding, kind of a maturization, I think, within our industry, that new technology isn't going to solve everything. And like we've seen in the past, new technologies are utilized to the max. And so they will fill up and they won't solve everything. And so we need to be smart about how we allocate our bandwidth and how we police network traffic in the positive sense of the word, right? Moving the fast vehicles to the priority lanes and the slow vehicles to the regular lanes, just like in inner city travel. And security is a big concern. Security can get in the way of all of these, rosy outlook. But happily, there's a strong awareness here. These vulnerabilities need to be addressed, and they will be addressed, and we're here to help you address them. So that's what we've got for you today. As I said, we will be sending you both an IDC report covering some of these same topics, as well as a telecom smart trends report summarizing the survey findings. So thank you for joining us. And let me point out in the lower right-hand corner again that we have another webinar coming up on these topics of DDoS and 5G. And it features the CISO from Rakuten, where some of our solutions are deployed, talking about their concerns. And we have some time for some questions. If you have them, please use the Q&A window. We'll be happy to answer them if you've got them. And again, let me say that the webinar will be available on demand on our website, and we will be sending you the link to that, as well as the presentation, and as well as the IDC report, and within the next week or two, the survey summary report. Any questions? Okay, well, thank you very much for joining us, and I hope this was informative and useful information for you all. What is the Allot solution for 5G security? We got a question just in the nick of time. So let me refer you to our website, because we talk about it in great depth there. There is the 5G network security, which is our ability to be deployed inline and detect incoming or outgoing attacks virtually instantaneously. We inspect every packet, so it's not a sampling solution that misses some of the attacks, and we can mitigate it very, very quickly, and we can share that mitigation across the network if we see it sprouting up elsewhere. It's called 5G Net Protect, and it's mentioned in this webinar, and you can find it on our website, and we'll be happy to talk with you about it. We also have end user security, consumer security solutions that work in 5G networks as well, and that's under the Allot Secure branding on our website. And that is something that will protect you on your end devices, regardless of how you're connecting to the network. Also a very exciting proposition for CSPs to market to their end users. Okay, so thank you all for participating, and look forward to seeing you at our next webinar. We've got the DDoS coming up in about 2 weeks' time. Have a good day, stay safe, and enjoy the rest of the day.